Thanks, David. And I'm really sorry I can't be with you and everybody else today. I'm actually based on the Pacific coast of the United States, and the time of day at which you're having this is one where, as a night owl, I confess I'm usually still in bed. But I am also going to be going away with my family today on a bit of a road trip. So I'm pre-recording this, but looking forward to catching up with the rest of the contributions in due course. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to offer an idea or two today. So the challenge, as I understood it, was to think of a way in which education could be revisited and reinvented as we move into kind of the next era of our digital world and digital lives. And I was initially interested in thinking about things like how we might be able to use virtual world education or education on different platforms like Twitch, and using some of the functionality of those platforms. But in the end, what I settled on was an idea that I'm calling the death of the single institution degree, or institutional polyamory. Now, there's a lot of buzzwords there. So what do I mean by that? Well, for me, one of the biggest takeaways of the last few months is a recognition that you can learn and work from anywhere. And indeed, I've had students doing so during the course of the last 3 months. So that principle for me applies not just to kind of where you study, but also who you study with. Geographical boundaries as a result of the pandemic have come tumbling down. And I think we'll see a lot of those principles carry forward into the way in which we lead our lives in the future. From an educational perspective, what that means is, what is to stop students from building a degree and studying with institutions anywhere in the world? It doesn't have to be somewhere within their own state or indeed their own country. They can study from their home in California with an institution in India or China, and dock into it in exactly the same way as they would do an institution that's just a mile down the road. So why do we think this is going to happen? Well, I think for me, there are three kind of key things to highlight here. The first is to recognize that young people in particular, in my view, are increasingly brand agnostic. Look at their relationship with streaming services or with supermarkets and so forth. What they're looking for is value for money. They're looking for quality. They are looking for distinctiveness. And I believe that those principles also carry over into the educational environment. We also have to recognize that college is expensive. We need, particularly as we move into a recession and potentially a depression, we need to think more and more about value for money. And also, more than ever, it's really important for us as educators to be ensuring that our students are as employable as possible. And as part of that, we also have to recognize that we operate within a global economy, and that we need to ensure our students understand the media landscape, not just as it pertains to the country that they are based in, but as it pertains to the whole world. So they need to be looking at the experience of mobile in India and transferable lessons from that. They need to be diving into how China uses social media and what that might mean for the likes of Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and so forth in the future, who are going to be following in the footsteps of the WeChats and TikToks of this world. And as educators and as institutions, we need to be asking, well, if we don't have that knowledge in-house, how can we partner with different institutions and individuals to ensure that we can give those students, our students, that knowledge? Now, to do this is clearly going to be incredibly complicated. This might seem quite a kind of radical idea, the notion that education is no longer going to be kind of place-based, but I think this is going to absolutely happen. Institutions are likely to be hugely, massively resistant to this, because they rely very much upon the dollars that they get from tuition as a key part of their revenue mix. There's also a risk, of course, that superstar instructors like David risk being overloaded. Once they're part of a global marketplace, there's no longer 20 students who can potentially sign up for a class with them, but 20,000 or more. So how do we manage that? That's clearly going to be a challenge, but it's one that we should try to overcome. Alongside this, we also have to recognize that face-to-face still remains incredibly valuable in terms of that experience and the relationship that you build with your peers and with your instructors, and that college is about more than just formal classes. It's about the opportunity to take part in student societies. It's about the people that you meet. It's about finding your feet as a person, and how we might be able to kind of replicate that experience, which you cannot do if your education is purely just online. Must excuse the inevitable jump cut there, as I had to pause this recording for an epic sneezing fit as a result of the fact that this is hay fever season here in Oregon. Now, so those are some of the challenges and some of the reasons why I believe that we need to do this. What are some of the opportunities that this idea presents? Well, the first thing to say is I think this has the opportunity to really raise standards and also encourage institutional specialization. If I can take a broadcast journalism class at 10 different organizations across the country, if they're all offering pretty much the same thing, how effective is that? How do we encourage institutions to kind of really specialize and differentiate from their competitors? We may create an environment where industry professionals are able to kind of dock in and out of this process alongside students, full-time students, which I think is quite exciting. It also enables us to kind of break out of our filter bubble, which I think is incredibly important, particularly here in the US, where we tend not to really look at much of what's going on beyond our own borders. In terms of how I think this would work, I think there's still a value for what I would refer to as anchor institutions, places where you would do the core of your degree, and that would still be face-to-face, but where you can specialize with partners to do specialist courses. So for the student experience, it's a hybrid degree, a mixture of face-to-face and online. And in doing this, we're going to encourage the educational sector to think more like a collective unit rather than a series of units. And I think we're going to have to work more collectively, because it's pretty clear that student numbers may well be massively affected during the course of the pandemic, and we cannot rely on the same number of students coming back in the fall and the autumn as we otherwise would have done. Governments are going to be under huge pressure in terms of the budgets and support that they are giving to institutions. So a falling amount of money that we get from government plus potentially reduced tuition costs means we just need to think about doing things differently. And of course, we also have to be alive to the fact that this is a sector that is ripe for disruption. What is to stop the likes of Google coming in and teaching computer science? Why should I take a computer science course at an academic institution if I can do one with Google? There was another brief sneezing break there. Why should I take a social analytics class with a professor when I can do one that is taught by Facebook? We have to be alive to the fact that other players might also start to eye up some of the possibilities in this space and the way in which they can directly not only provide education, but then a throughput to employment, which I think will be very, very attractive to many students. So the bottom line is that we need to think about doing things differently. And for me, COVID-19 is a wake-up call to doing that, both in terms of the way, the education that we offer, but also the way in which we offer it. So in that vein, I propose that the death of the single institutional degree is inevitable, and that institutional polyamory has to be leaned into, whether we like it or not.